Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 21st installment of my Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links Best Deck series. Today I'm going to be showing you a deck called Naturia. So just a couple of things before the video starts. First of all, I have no idea how to pronounce the word Naturia, so I'm sorry about my pronunciation of the word. And secondly, I'd just like to say this deck is actually, I think, pretty underrated. Naturia monsters, as more introduced into Duel Links, I think will eventually have their own really strong meta deck. This deck in its current state isn't exactly the strongest, but I've had mild success at Platinum rank. It's got a very slow climb going with the deck, but it does seem fairly good, fairly consistent, and hopefully as more Naturia monsters are released, this deck will become a strong, standard meta deck. And without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright, so the best character for this deck is Bandit Keith with the skill Restart. Just so you know, you can actually get the skill Restart on a variety of characters. It's just much easier to get it on Keith as it's not a drop. You can get it on Keith by reaching level 20, I believe. What this skill does is it allows you to essentially redraw your starting hand if you don't like the first one. So it's very consistent, it's a very strong ability for pretty much any deck. There's no particular reason that this skill is used with Naturia decks, as it's not like it's any synergy or anything. It's just this skill is a very strong skill that is kind of the one that you go to if you're just looking for an all-round skill for any deck out there. Especially with maybe a combo related deck such as this one is fairly combo orientated-ish, it's good to be able to get the cards you want in your starting hand for the combo. Alright, so now I'll go through the deck list. Again, I'm sorry for my pronunciation, there are a few of these words that are a little bit iffy and I don't exactly know how to pronounce them, but I'll try my best. This deck contains 3 Naturia Marrons, 3 Naturia Stag Beetle, 3 Naturia Hydrangea, 3 Naturia Pumpkin, 1 Naturia Strawberry, 3 Exterio Fang, 2 enemy controllers and 2 mirror walls. So a couple of cards you can replace in this deck. For example, Mirror Wall can now be replaced by the new card Super Rush Headlong, which is pretty much the same kind of card, it does the same exact effect. Only Mirror Wall's kind of a little bit stronger, so I'd say Super Rush Headlong is just kind of a budget version of Mirror Wall, but it is a good replacement if you don't have any. As normal, Enemy Controller can be replaced by things like Sphere Karibo or Windstorm of Attackwa, as they all perform the same kind of role, it's just Enemy Controller has an added bonus in this deck, which I'll talk about later on, but it's definitely better in this deck than the other two. And the final card that I'd say could be replaced is Naturia Strawberry, which is just a general strong Naturia monster. You can replace it with just about anything. You can put in an extra enemy control, an extra mirror wall, a super rush headlong. You can just put in any old monster you like. It's just not necessary, it's just, I think it's good to have an extra strong Naturia monster in the deck. Alright, now I'll talk about the strategy behind the deck. This deck has a fairly simple strategy, but it does have a lot of pieces to it, as each individual piece has its own role and function in the deck. The main combo is you play your Naturia Pumpkin, activate its ability which allows you to special summon a Naturia monster from your hand, you summon your Naturia Stag Beetle, and then you can use your Naturia Hydrangea, which allows it to be special summoned if you have used a Naturia monster's ability this turn. And there you have 3 monsters on the board ready to go. So a few things you need to note with the combo is, first of all, there's quite a few variations of how you achieve summoning your Naturia Stag Beetle or your Naturia Hydrangea. Sometimes you'll be able to simply just tribute summon the Naturia Stag Beetle, as it only takes 1 tribute, and a lot of the time you'll find your monsters will be alive due to the protection this deck is running. And your Naturia Hydrangea can also be summoned using your Naturia Marrons, as they also use their ability during your turn. Keep in mind, it has to be during your turn that you use the ability to summon the Naturia Hydrangea. Any other monsters that happen to use their ability during your opponent's turn, such as the Strawberries or the Stag Beetles during the battle phase, both of them will no longer allow you to summon your Naturia Hydrangeas. Naturia Marron is a very versatile card. It does 3 things for this deck. First of all, it allows you to cycle cards, as when there are 2 Naturia monsters in your graveyard, you can activate its ability to pull them, but put them back into your deck and draw a card. Its second role is that when it is summoned, it allows you to send a Naturia monster from your deck to the graveyard, which enables Naturia Stag Beetle's ability, which I'll talk about in a second. And the third role is to give you another way of summoning Naturia Hydrangeas from your hand. So how it enables your Naturia Stag beetle is what your Naturia Stag beetle does is when it declares an attack, whenever your opponent activates a card in response to that, whether it be a creature or spell or a trap, its effect activates, which allows you to pull a Naturia monster from the graveyard onto the battlefield. So therefore your Naturia Marron putting a Stag Beetle in the graveyard will allow you to then use your other Stag Beetle to pull the second one out, which, keep in mind, will be able to attack during the exact same battle phase. Now the main weakness of this deck is obviously most of your Naturia monsters have very low attack stats, so you have to keep them alive, which is why this deck runs a ton of protection cards. Because as long as you keep your Naturia monsters alive, they'll each be able to use their abilities, and you'll be able to get through the game fairly smoothly. The last kind of key component of the strategy is Exterio's Fang, which allows you to negate any spell or trap card your opponent activates. This card is just too good to pass up in a Naturia deck. Being able to negate spell and trap cards is a very strong ability to have. It allows you to swing in with literally any monster you have. If they have a mirror wall, negate it. If they have a enemy controller, it gets negated. It's a perfect card. The downside of Exterio's Fang is it makes you discard a card, so that is another reason why Naturia Marron is really good, as it allows you to discard a Naturia monster to the graveyard, which just lets your Naturia Marron have an extra card to put back into the deck so you can draw more cards, using its ability. So if you didn't understand the strategy of this deck, don't worry, at the end of the video I'll have 3 gameplay clips for you to watch, which will show you this deck in action and basically just give you a rough understanding of how the deck runs. But for now, I'm going to go through each of the monster cards in the deck and each of the spell and trap cards in the deck to give you more understanding of what each card does and what its role is. I'll start with the monster cards. So basically I've already gone through each of these monster cards but Naturia Strawberry, but I'll go through them all again, just a little bit of a brief rundown. So Naturia Pumpkin is your main way of getting your Naturia Stag Beetle out on the board. When your opponent controls a monster and you summon him, you can then special summon a Naturia monster from your hand. This can be any of your Naturia monsters you like if you just want an extra Naturia monster on the board. And the main one you're aiming for is your Naturia Stag Beetle, as that's by far the strongest monster in your deck, ability wise and stat wise. Naturia Stag Beetle is the most powerful monster in your deck and is your main win condition. Basically, it has a strong stat line and it has a really good ability. What its ability does is whenever your opponent activates a spell, a trap, or a monster card during its attack, so when it declares an attack, it can then summon a Naturia monster from the graveyard onto the battlefield, which can then attack during the same battle phase. So essentially you can pull another Naturia Stag Beetle out of the graveyard onto the battlefield to then declare another attack. Another good thing about this beetle is it only takes 1 card to tribute, so it's always really easy to get out on the board, especially with the amount of protection this deck runs. You will nearly always have a monster on the board for it to be summoned with. Naturia Hydrangea is a fairly well statted monster, and it is your second most powerful monster. Basically, this card allows itself to be special summoned as long as you have used a Naturia monster's ability during this turn. Keep in mind, it can only be used during your turn, so the only cards it works with are Naturia Pumpkin and Naturia Marron, as it doesn't work during the battle phase either, so that rules Stag Beetle out. So quite often you'll find this monster will help you pull off a 1-turn kill scenario, as you'll easily be able to summon 3 Naturia monsters in 1 turn with this card as the extra one. Naturia Marron has 3 uses in this deck. The first is it is able to cycle through cards, as when there are 2 Naturia monsters in the graveyard, it can send them back to the deck and allow you to draw a card. Secondly, it allows you to send a Naturia monster to the graveyard when it is summoned, which not only activates its own ability, or helps activate it, it also gives you a monster to special summon using Naturia Stag Beetle's effect. And the third use is simply another card to be able to summon your Naturia Hydrangea, using its ability. Naturia Strawberry, like I said at the start of the video, is easily replaceable. It's not needed in the deck, but I think it's nice to have an extra powerful Naturia monster that has some synergy with the deck. What Naturia Strawberry does is, once per turn when your opponent normal summons or special summons a monster, target one of the monsters, and this monster will gain 100 attack times the level of the monster until the end phase. So normally they'll be summoning a 4-star monster, that's mostly the average. So normally this card during your opponent's turn will have 2000 attack, making it pretty hard to kill, which gives it a easy tribute for Naturia Stag beetle, or just even to keep it alive for when you want to try and attack your opponent for lethal. Alright, now I'll go through the spells and traps in the deck. What Exterio's Fang does is, as long as you control one face-up Naturia monster, you can negate the activation of a spell or trap card and destroy it. And the only downside is you then have to discard one card from your hand to the graveyard, which with this deck can actually have some synergy, especially with Naturia Marron, but also with Naturia Stag beetle as well. Most of the time you'll be using this during your battle phase when you try to attack your opponent and they activate their backline cards as a way of just making sure your attacks will go through and will destroy the targets you want them to. But sometimes it can just be used just to protect your monsters from cards like Order to Charge and things like that. Enemy Controller has two uses in the deck. First of all is the main use, which is whenever your opponent attacks you, you can then activate your enemy controller and change their battle position, therefore negating the attack. The second use is you can tribute one monster and take control of one of your opponent's monsters, which can remove a blocker to be able to let you attack their life points directly, or you can use it to stop one of your opponent's entire battle phase. When they declare an attack using 3 monsters, you can just take control of the highest attack one, stopping their battle phase completely. And kind of a cool thing you can do with enemy controller, especially with decks like this one, is when you have a tribute monster in your hand, a high level monster that requires a tribute, you can activate enemy controller, destroy one of your monsters, take control of one of theirs, and then you can use their monster as a tribute, so they actually don't get their monster back. Mirror Wall is your main defense for your monsters as they are all low statted. Basically what Mirror Wall does is each of your opponent's monsters that conducts attack while this card's face up on the field will have their attack halved as long as this card remains face up on the field. So basically when your opponent declares an attack, you can activate your Mirror Wall, half their attack, and they'll be destroyed by your low statted monsters. A great thing about Mirror Wall is you actually have the option most of the time to keep it around a second turn afterwards, as long as you pay 2000 life points, the card will not be destroyed the following turn, which most of the time you'll be able to do if you think you need to. Alright guys, that's pretty much it for this video. Stick around for gameplay if you want to see this deck in action, but otherwise, thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.
Duel! Duel!